We are on the lunch break on the first day of questioning of the undercover police officer, Jim Boyling, who was deployed undercover in animal rights groups, hunt sab groups in East London and Essex, Reclaim the Streets, Earth First. He used the cover name Jim Sutton, had the code name Psycho Dream, HN14. I'm joined alongside me with Alex, who was one of the Reclaim the Streets activists, and Ben, who's coming back to talk about some of the things that we couldn't say in the first one. But first off, Alex, this is your first time seeing a man that you knew as Jim Sutton for 25 years. What have you made of it?
Well, yeah, I haven't seen him. He was very well known to me at one time. We worked very closely in Reclaim the Streets. I have obviously been involved in supporting a lot of people who he's treated very badly over the last 15 years since we discovered he was confirmed that he was definitely an undercover cop. And some of it, I knew of his behaviour, but it is shocking still how repulsive I find him across the room. And I actually felt physically uncomfortable seeing him. It was like uncomfortable, and he's a gross person. He behaves repulsively. He's kind of smug.
Yeah, he is rather, yeah.
He's kind of, I mean, it's interesting. Someone said to me, because he's obviously the protege at the time and still very close to Bob Lambert, and he has grown, his mannerisms he's growing to look a bit like Bob Lambert and to act a bit like Bob Lambert, except that when Lambert came to give evidence, he pretended to be a bumbling old man. But Jim is playing the opposite. He's playing I'm a really sharp intellectual. He dresses like someone out of Jazz Club off the Fast Show, peers over his glasses like he's John Paul fucking Sartre or whatever. And I mean, tries to be a little bit kind of, I'm ahead of the game. I'm really sharp. I remember everything. Well, it is interesting though. He said a couple of things in this session which I thought. So he has basically just alleged that the solicitor, Mike Schwartz, who was representing arrestees in the Good Easter Hunt Sab arrest, was basically producing witness statements for him to sign that he hadn't written, which is basically accusing Mike Schwartz of, I think that's accusing him of legal impropriety. Is that not accusing him? I think that would be considered improper behaviour legally.
I'm not sure the exact legal setting for that, but yeah, sounds bad anyway.
And I thought that was interesting because Mike Schwartz is present in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's surprising actually how many of the lawyers from the time are also the lawyers in the room.
Our lawyers are still our lawyers. Interestingly enough,
almost as if human rights lawyers isn't particularly kind of.
It's a limited pool.
Yeah. Quite. There were a lot of questions. I felt there was a moment where, as you say, he's like trying to present this particular character. I really felt that slipped when he was asked about the meeting that he had with his managers about his wife leaving him. A meeting that took place in the August.
Is this relevant? He said.
Yes.
He was asked about the fact that his wife, his real wife in his real life, had left him, and he got quite shirty and said, "Is this relevant?" So this is a man who, in his undercover identity, personality, deceived 3 women into intimate relationships.
Having 2 children.
Had 2 children with one of them. Had a relationship that lasted several years. He lied and lied and lied to those women, abused them. And then, but is it relevant that someone asked him a couple of questions about, his real? He really. That the arrogance kind of came out a bit there, I thought.
I mean, it really did. It really did because he was asked, why did he wait until the August to report it when she had left him in the January, 7 months? He was asked, was his undercover deployment a reason for the relationship coming to end? He said, "Oh no, not in this case. I think the blame lies with her.
The blame lies on the other side," he said.
Yeah.
I'm not to blame.
I mean, and I think we can all take his word for it. Obviously, not his fault.
Because you can tell from his personality that there's absolutely no way that any woman would ever want to leave him.
Just quickly, if you are watching this, please consider liking it, sharing it. I feel so cringe asking, but it does seem to work. Please, if you're able to like whatever platform, please leave a comment if you want to ask anything. During the first break, we had join us. We tried to talk about some stuff. We weren't able to talk about it because of a restriction order. Now, in what feels like a very rare occurrence at the inquiry in real time, the restriction order has been lifted. We are no longer bound by that restriction order that made for that very awkward conversation earlier. So, Ben, there were some things you wanted to say earlier that you didn't get a chance to.
Indeed.
Please say it now.
In the last break, I actually spoke to Bar, having been told by email this morning that it was too late to remove the restriction order, but they did, like, shortly after I spoke to Bar. Yes, so one of the things we couldn't talk about, or perhaps couldn't talk about, was when Boyling insisted that you couldn't usually get close to terrier men during the hunt as an explanation why people might research their addresses. It's like, I know he's been sabbing. The terrier men, for those that don't know, are the quite unpleasant guys who, for fun, will dig up foxes out when they go to ground and throw them to the hounds. And they are very violent, unpleasant people, and hunt sabs often come into close proximity with them. And
usually they're trying to get into close proximity with you as a sab, and you're trying to avoid it.
Yes, I mean, it's definitely not an uncommon confrontational scenario is for hunt sabs is to meet the terrier men. So yes, you don't need to track them down.
But there was a lot more that you wanted to say this morning. During the first break.
So we couldn't talk about Operation Gant because I had the RO in relation to my name and the accusations which Boyling made against me, basically involving me in what is described as a series of 50 incendiary device attacks mostly in East London, which appeared to be from the mid-1980s. It was an operation that ran in parallel with Operation Sparkler. For those of you who are paying attention, that's the Debenhams incendiary attacks, which involve Bob Lambert. I was at school during that period of time, and not a vegetarian. I was a meat eater, definitely not an animal rights activist. It's unclear exactly what crimes Boyling himself was supposedly investigating under Operation Gant. And one really interesting thing that came up at the end there was that he said another officer after him was tasked with Operation Gant.
And also that when he was taken off Operation Gant, with the resumption of the IRA's bombing campaign, with the very high profile bombing of Canary Wharf in February of 96, there was a supposedly SO13 informed the SDS they had no interest in the ALF anymore. They had much more serious things to deal with. And supposedly Operation Gant was then shelved. According to Boyling, the other SDS officer who was looking into it returned to it several years later.
Yes, so that particular report, which is from Bob Lambert in a lift with SO13, and not being particularly complimentary about him either, he says two things of interest. One is that SO13 have kind of responded to his request that they proceed only with inquiries but no arrests and no searches, which is an odd thing to do, and that if they ever were to open the case again, the same would apply. No arrests, no searches, inquiries only, which is a really bizarre thing.
I mean, it is bizarre. I mean, like the reason for it, and that the reason which Barr sort of pointed out, was it was in order to protect the existence of an SDS officer right at the heart of it. In his written statement, Jim Boyling has named the person he believes to be responsible for this long-running incendiary device campaign against supporters and members of the Essex Hunt. He admitted he has no evidence for that whatsoever. But that he was sure it was him, based on some sort of copper's hunch, by the sound of it, which, I mean, you know, it was pointed out that as there was no evidence, that this person was never charged, and no charge was ever brought against anybody for this incendiary device campaign. I mean, it has been said before, but there's a distinct lack of evidence generally for this incendiary device campaign. Certainly, it's not something that was appearing in like the radical animal liberation press as many other things were at the time.
I mean, if that's the case, that is unusual, because like there were literally bulletins put out all the time with like man bricks, you know, butcher's shop's window gets bricked, like, you know.
Yeah, to not appear in the pages of Green Anarchist.
It's unlikely, or the ALFSG bulletin. But I mean, it's also interesting. I mean, he said like they did say Boyling said, and Lambert's, I presume that's a memo of Lambert's from the time, said this is a resourcing issue. We have had to pull all SO13 anti-terrorist resources effectively have been pulled back onto the IRA, but resources are never in short supply in Special Branch. They're not in short supply, and in response to that, it's like we're pulling you out of that and putting you on to reclaim the streets. Who are having parties in the street? I mean, you know.
Yeah, so we've got a situation where there's 50 incendiary device attacks, people being named as the suspects in this. Let's send this guy instead to. No, we won't finish up with that. We'll just go to where the sandpits are. Yeah. It's absolutely bonkers.
I mean, supposedly the reason being was that RTS street party in Islington had got out of control.
They had a tank. They had a tank.
So, I mean, obviously that was state precedence. He also said that he wasn't leaving animal rights, that he continued to be like
he used it as he continued to go hunt sabbing and kind of report on a no level. But I mean, I think it's interesting, and I think it is something we've examined in the discussions with the Sikh co-participants who were involved in RTS, and a little bit in the sort of podcast we did, which came out this morning, which is that the thing about public disorder is a bit of a red herring. I mean, what the SDS is in fact doing in lots of cases, it's much more interested in people doing interesting things and spreading interesting ideas and interesting politics and putting alternatives which are attracting lots of people. So in fact, people planting incendiary devices in East London, that's maybe a little bit of a SO13 matter. What real SDS is really interested in is, large gatherings of people who pose an actual threat to the ideas, the prevailing ideas of society, and are going against that. And it's not so much about disorder; it's about attractive ideas that are pushing an actual alternative.
I'm really reminded, going back to Tranche 1, Phase 1, when we heard from Doug, the undercover officer subject, the very first episode of the Spy Cops Info podcast, who said there was a lot of long-haired hippie layabouts needed a good clout, and this was about giving him a good clout. And here we are, decades later, and nothing really has changed.
I was disappointed. They talked about the video of Boyling at the arrests for Good Easter Hunter, but they didn't show it. They showed all kinds of videos in Tranche 1, but this video shows an undercover cop physically intervening with uniformed officers after other people's arrests and getting beaten by uniformed officers with their truncheons repeatedly, and they didn't show it.
Is that to spare his feelings, do you think?
I don't know why they didn't show it, but we will.
Yeah, videos will be. I mean, look out for all sorts of stuff being released. I mean, as has been the case recently, particularly with Reclaim the Streets, because there's so much incredibly good video. The Campaign Opposing Police Surveillance has been sharing loads and loads of videos, along with photographs. As Dick Pandarian, as ever, on Twitter, is like reposting a lot of the reports I'm doing live with photographs and some videos to follow, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'll look at that video and get it up on the website. But yes, it was an interesting looking back, because at the time I didn't know that he had done that. My face was pressed up against the side of a police van, and looking back at that video, it's like, why the hell wasn't he arrested? It's quite stunning. If you watch the chronology of us getting the rest of us getting arrested, our driver gets arrested. Someone complains that he is being arrested, just verbally, like, why are you arresting him? They get arrested. Someone else complains, why are you arresting her? And then it's this knock-on effect until Boyling bundles in, and on the video you can hear the police with the camera calling it in, saying it's all getting a bit naughty, and they send some more cops. But that's Boyling being naughty. So this statement that he denies writing, which he seems to be implying was written by Mike or someone at Byman's, it was an awful witness statement. Really, it wouldn't be one that you would want for your defense. at all.
Oh, so it was 2 pages. It was 2 pages or something. I mean, it's very unlikely that. I mean, unless it is a draft, but it is. There's a bit of murkiness going on there. I suspect that he's not. He's been a bit economical with the truth. I think he would have offered. He would have offered to be a witness. He would have been asked, and he would have been. He would have had meetings around that, and I think he's concealing some of that.
Oh, and he implied that the reason he hadn't come into court and was sitting at a cafe with other people was that the intimidating looking people wouldn't be wanted in court. So they sat out in the cafe. They'd come to support, but they didn't actually come at all into court. Nobody remembers sitting in a cafe with him at all. And it has been suggested that the reason he was in a cafe, not in the court, was that he was waiting to hear whether he would be called to give evidence.
We also saw some reports. Do you want to bring something in on that?
Not unrelated to that, but something else.
I was going to go on a different topic. So
okay. Well, another thing that I know that he Boyling referred to in terms of both getting involved in the hunt subs and getting involved in RTS is this implication that these were kind of shadowy organizations that it was really difficult to be recruited into, that you had to be invited by someone meeting you on a dark street with with a cloak over, like it's an episode of The Traitors or something. And I mean, it's just not like that. I mean, people would meet someone and they'd kind of invite them to go hunt sabbing. And hundreds of people used to go hunt sabbing all the time. RTS meetings were full of people. There were 60, 70, 80 people at loads of those meetings. They weren't, to say whether they weren't advertised, everyone knew where the meetings were. They were weekly in the same place for several months, usually. They might move to another venue. These weren't secrets. These weren't kind of difficult things to get involved in. He's kind of implying that he's a little bit he's been a bit of a master detective in kind of being, managing to worm his way into these secret Illuminati type networks.
I mean, he painted a picture of going on a hunt sab, recognizing somebody who he knew had been involved in disorder at the Islington Street Party, and then engaging them in conversation throughout the day until eventually they mentioned that he should come along to a RTS meeting, and therefore that was his in. I mean, it's just utterly ridiculous.
It's rubbish. It's like, I mean, how did he manage to recognize someone who was involved in disorder at the Islington Street Party when he says he was not present at the Islington Street Party?
I mean, the inference is, I guess, is that he's looked through all the photographs.
He's been shown some pictures.
A super detective. We also saw reports by him about things that he'd read on an email list. Reporting on what somebody had posted who lived in Vermont about a demonstration that was due to happen in Dunedin in New Zealand. And it was put to him, what was the importance of this to public order? And he said, in direct contradiction of what he said earlier, that he didn't say there was any connection to public order. Yeah, he just said that all his reports were about public order. There was no reason for him to report these things. Yeah, he said, well, I reported everything. He said he reported everything, and his handlers would decide whether or not a report went in, except when he was asked about the Amanzi email list, in which case he said he would have reported it if it had been relevant. We haven't seen any reporting from the Amanzi list, apart from the subscriber information, who is on it. One assumes that if he had been reporting about criminal discussions taking place on that list, then it would be relevant. But the point was, he said he reported everything regarding of relevance, but it's not there.
In fact, he did mention something related to that, and he said because it was relating to was it a demonstration in Dunedin in New Zealand, that he reported that particular bit of information because of Helen Steele and the New Zealand connection. So at this point, Helen Steele was still trying to track down, as she thought, her former partner, known to her as John Barker, or New Zealand John, who she had, I think by this time, discovered was an undercover police officer, and who may in fact have been, she suspected he had gone to New Zealand, or he had family in New Zealand, so she was trying to track him down in New Zealand. So it may be that actually there was specific information from his managers to tasking him to report any information relating to Helen Steele's pursuit of John Dines. But Barr didn't follow that up, actually. I thought Barr would jump on that because I think that was an interesting point. But Barr seems very slow to kind of pick up on points like that.
I mean, in Barr's defense, I would say that, I mean, his style generally is to drop in and out of topics. And it wouldn't surprise me
I
if
think he's
that's
coming back to that.
revisited tomorrow, maybe the day after. And he often sort of like gets somebody talking very fluidly about something, then drops in a question about something which he knows that person has been like guarded about in the past.
I'm sure the McLibel, McSpotlight, Helen Steele stuff was going to come back for sure. And that was actually a different mailing list to the Amanzi one. So they were talking about one of the McLibel support mailing lists. And there's the reason that this stuff, and you'll hear more of it's coming up, is relevant. It's the whole issue of the Computer Misuse Act and interception of communications. Like, how did Boyling get to report the subscribers on a mailing list, which he said is private? Either he had obtained, had got himself invited through deception, or he had accessed a computer which had that information available to it, somebody else's machine with details of the subscribers. Either way, it's dodgy ground legally, and it's going to be explored a lot more about access to passwords, access to computers, the sharing of stuff with handlers that has been received on email lists and then forwarded. All comes up kind of potentially under the interception of communications.
We also saw some reports about an Earth First action at a quarry. We saw the beforehand reports, and then we saw other reports of it from afterwards at an RTS meeting where there was discussion about what had happened. And it was understood that one of the reasons why that particular action had been so successful is that local police had no idea that it was intended. And it was put to Boyling. It was like, look, you've reported on it. You've got a pre-formal report about what's due to happen, what the plans are. Why? This is public order information. Why wasn't it shared with local police? I mean, he had no answer for that.
No, and I mean, this will come up in relation to future questions to Boyling about future actions. That quite serious intelligence passed by Boyling to his managers, and from there to the Metropolitan Police hierarchy, was also not acted on quite deliberately for other reasons, for reasons of actually allowing disorder to go ahead, or for territorial disputes between the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police. So quite deliberately, the SDS is withholding intelligence from other parts of the police, possibly, or possibly it's not true, and possibly the intelligence was passed to the local police, but they were told you cannot act on it. So this is a common theme with the spy cops, but with Boyling, it does seem to be a repeated question. Why was your intelligence not acted on in quite, what ought to have been quite serious issues that you thought the police might want to do something about?
Yeah, this came up during the Monica's testimony, and it's quite important because we later see, and this was in Kate Wilson's IBT disclosure, the use of that action in the justification for Rod Richardson's deployment under the MPOAU. And from the Boyling's reports, we see that he knew that the people organising it were London first, and yet it's used as the justification for a deployment of an officer in Nottingham. It's like, make that make sense. For a start, you already had the undercover officer in there. So it's a historic event. It can't possibly be a justification for a new officer. And secondly, you knew that it was organised not from like the North, activists in the North, but by activists in London. It just makes no sense.
Isn't there? What's the time gap between Watley Quarry and Rod Richardson? It's a couple of years.
Oh, it's huge, huge. It's got to be, 3 years? Yeah. It's totally historic.
Yeah, and I mean, we see these huge time gaps in numerous sort of elements of it, don't we? I mean, like we even going back
Operation Gantt.
Operation Gantt. I mean, we've got stuff being reported on in the August that was happened in the February. I mean, there seems to be,
well, it's a 10-year gap,
right? Yeah,
like Lambert is deploying Boyling to investigate Operation Gantt, which we know from SO13 estate. We know was an operation that running parallel with Operation Sparkler, which places it in the mid-80s.
We also saw reports, and I think this is another theme that's going to come up again and again of within his report there was an example of a reporting of a solidarity action being carried out by some people against Blue Arrow contractors for the Newbury bypass. He's asked how he knows about that. Was he at the action? No, he was not the action. Was he? Where did he hear about it? He said, "Oh, I don't know. Were you at the meeting where it was discussed?" No, I wasn't at that meeting either. And again, it's this thing of hearsay, like a number of steps removed that the officers are putting in their reports. Other reports which were just like, where's this information come from? Oh, I think it was on a flyer. I mean, it's the idea that you need an undercover officer to pick up a flyer and then write it in their own words.
Either they're spending a huge amount of resources on someone picking up gossip and bits of paper that anyone could, anyone could actually pick up, or they're concealing the fact that there were other sources of that information. I mean, given that we know that at the time that Boyling was getting involved in Reclaim the Streets, there was at least one police informant within the anti-roads protests and who had contact with RTS. And so it's possible that they are concealing the fact that they have other sources of this information that we're either names that we are aware of and they're not revealing that that's the source, like Nick Gratwick, or other sources that they're not revealing that we haven't yet discovered. I wanted to come back to that time lag thing. You're talking about the time lag between things. I mean, one thing that they said about in relation to the East London, that Huntsabs or ELAR or people who might be considered who might be considered members of the ALF, was that they considered them possibly still active even if they hadn't actually done anything for 8 years. They said and we've seen that as well in that, with Monica last week, gave evidence that they were still following her around. She was no longer effectively an activist. She was living miles away from London. She was not active at all. But a long time after that, they were still producing reports on her and keeping, and they opened a new registry file on her, I think, a long time after she was active. So they're basically kind of, once they've opened a file on you, once they see that you never escape their attention fully.
Changing subject, I wanted to talk about Barr misrepresenting my evidence. So there's a report there's a report in which Boyling in the Good Easter Huntsab case, there's the thing talking about the wooden staves to be used as weapons, which Boyling reports on. And Barr puts it to him that Mr. Leamy has said it was for firewood. That is not the case at all. I said, none of us in that van have any idea why that wood was there. We have no memory of it. But what I do remember, at some point before or after that incident, and I don't know if it relates at all, is I remember there being a bunch of awkwardly placed wood in the van and someone saying they were collecting it for fire to take home for firewood. I don't remember who that was. I don't remember when that was. I do remember it as an incident. And I'd never said in relation to the Good Easter Huntsab Day that it was for firewood. I don't know. I have no idea, and I definitely didn't say that. And the way in which you carefully construct the wording of your statement to get across a certain, nuances are lost when they are put to Boyling or whoever in this kind of gisted fashion. And my statement isn't there for anyone to go and have a look and see what I actually said. And it should have been.
Will you still be self-publishing?
I am self-publishing. Don't know if it'll be this evening or tomorrow. Obviously, it's a very risky, very risky prospect. I've been very, very careful going through the document to redact stuff which relates to content of documents which have yet to be published. But even like last night, when I was looking on the list of documents that the inquiry has put into HN18's bundle for publication, even then, like the day before he gives evidence, his own witness statement was listed as waiting approval. It's like, how can he possibly be giving evidence if you can't publish his witness statement on the same day?
And his witness statement has been published, as I understand it. It was published this morning, first thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of documents that yesterday they were saying waiting approval. So I've done redactions. I'm ready to publish, but I will have to check at the end of the day, see what's actually been put up. But, you know, if I make a mistake, it's not deliberate, it's not reckless. I have tried my hardest.
Fair play. Just again, quickly, if you are watching and you haven't liked yet, please like this video, please share it. There's 83 people watching at the moment, only 8 have liked. It'd be really great if we get those numbers up. It does make a difference to how much we
Smash like.
I feel such cringe saying that. Well, I think we've covered most of the things that Jim Boyling said this morning. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, there's a lot more to come. It's really it's fascinating stuff, and he is responding. He's not doing so much of the I can't remember, I can't recall.
Though he is using it a bit.
He is using it a bit. He is a bit selective, and you know, it's 30 years ago, but I can remember this. Yeah.
I mean, having read his witness statement previously, and the tone of that, and given that he remains the only undercover officer so far to have been sacked for misconduct, I did think he carries a bit of a personal bitterness and anger against the Metropolitan Police Service, and I think a little bit of that has started to come out. He did early on kind of seem to be saying, yes, everyone knew about sexual relationships. It was common knowledge. It wasn't a secret. You know, I knew it before I was even in Special Branch. I knew it before I was deployed. He pulled back a bit on that, and then he kind of, and the only person he was willing to name was in fact Peter Francis. So Peter Francis, the only spy cop who has actually been willing to come out and be a whistleblower, is the only one that Boyling would actually say, yes, he's the person that I know was having relationships. However, I think Boyling is prepared to kind of speak his mind a little bit more than some of the other ones. What I think he's probably not going to do is land certain people in it, other officers in it necessarily, but I think he's probably prepared to stick it to the hierarchy a little bit because of his own history of being sacked. But we'll have to see. 4 days is not a lot for all the disgusting things that Jim Boyling has done and all the things we wanted to question about him questioned about. So I don't know. It remains to be seen how much he's prepared to speak beyond the usual don't recall, was a long time ago.
I did notice when he referenced some reports that were written by Bob Lambert, he had to say, oh, they were very interesting, well written. Oh, you know, my mate Bob.
Yeah, I mean, it's all going to unfold. I think I was really, really keen that the Gantt stuff got covered properly because it's the interface between Lambert's fantasies and Boyling's fantasies, and it sets the scene for the beginning of like a long history of malfeasance and lies and exaggerations, and if he was doing that like literally in the first making plots up, making shit up, if he was doing that literally within like 6 months or whatever of deployment,
immediately
deployed on what I would argue was a complete pretext anyway. I mean, it's as far as I understand it, it's a historic series of crimes which don't appear to have existed anyway.
Well, that's the question, because Lambert himself, who acted as an agent provocateur, and was quite clearly willing to push the boundary of what between reporting and drawing people into plots and getting them arrested and getting them sent to prison. How much was he kind of encouraging his protege mentoring someone who was working for him into acting in the same way?
Yeah.
Was he encouraging Boyling to be an agent provocateur or to, entrap people?
And were these supposed crimes from the parallel to the period of Sparkler something that ever took place at all, or are they fantasy reporting that we haven't seen from Lambert for the benefit of SDS budget and for commendations or whatever? Were they an entire fantasy? Did he do them?
There's a lot more to come. We will be going back in just before 2 o'clock, and none of us had our lunch yet. So unless there's anything else anybody would like to add, we'll please continue to follow the coverage. You can follow just the hashtag SpyCops. You'll find it on whichever platform you use. Join us again. We'll be doing another video during the afternoon break and at the end of the day. So unless anything wants to add anything, bye for now.
About this, someone was saying they reckon they were